Believe, an LA football podcast.
Touchdown Rams!
Touchdown UCLA!
Recovered by the Chargers.
The Trojans back in front.
Touchdown Wildcats!
With your host, Ryan Dyrud, on the Believe Podcast Network and LAFBnetwork.com. This is your destination for Los Angeles football.
What's up, Los Angeles football fans, and welcome back to another episode of the Believe in LA Football Podcast here on the Believe Podcast Network, also on LAFBnetwork.com, your destination for all your favorite Los Angeles football teams. Happy Thursday. Hope everyone's doing great out there, staying safe. Another beautiful day here in sunny SoCal. Got a great episode for you today, a couple of interviews for you. Chargers fans, welcome on Josh McCuistion. He's a co-publisher of Sooner Scoop of Rivals. So we're going to talk a little Kenneth Murray, one of the highly touted first-round, 23rd overall draft picks for the Chargers. Linebacker, lot of talent, physical specimen, a lot of excitement around this kid and what he's going to bring to this Gus Bradley defense. So Josh is able to give us some insight as he obviously was on the recruiting trail, knew about the history of Kenneth, and obviously watched him all through his tenure at Oklahoma, so was able to give us some insight on what to expect from Murray with this Chargers team. And then Rams fan, I am joined by Jourdan Rodrigue. She is the new Rams beat writer for The Athletic. Just kind of talk her journey in journalism and what she thinks of this Rams team and McVay and have some fun talking football. So great show for you. Really excited to get to these interviews, so we'll get right to that. But first, got to talk about my friends at betonline.ag. While you're waiting this out at home, you can still have fun betting with our partner betonline.ag. I know there's no NBA. Currently no NHL, coming back though. Hope you heard that NHL return to play plan. It sounds like a lot of fun. I like it a lot. But right now nothing, no MLB. But BetOnline still has hundreds of games and events and sports to wager on. Win some money during this quarantine. NASCAR's back. There's Madden and NBA 2K simulations. There's been some UFC fights, more coming up, and obviously the online casino with poker and blackjack. And be sure to check out The Final Dance with roundtable interviews from ex-Chicago Bulls Horace Grant, Bill Cartwright, Craig Hodges, and Ron Harper as they discuss the Michael Jordan doc in full. That great documentary, The Last Dance. This is The Final Dance. A great documentary brought to you by BetOnline. So still plenty of fun to be had at betonline.ag. Make sure to use the promo code. You've heard it probably many times, MyPod100. That's MYPOD100, and you're going to receive a welcome bonus on your first deposit. Again, that's betonline.ag. Use my promo code MyPod100. BetOnline, your online wagering solution. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get to these interviews. Really excited about them. Hope you all enjoy them. Let's start off with my interview with Josh. All right, absolutely delighted to be welcoming on my next guest of the Believe in LA Football Podcast. He is the co-publisher of Sooner Scoop of Rivals, Josh McCuistion. What's going on, man? How you doing?
Doing well here, Ryan. I think kind of like everybody else, just it feels like maybe football's at our fingertips again. So that's exciting. But other than that, man, I'm just kind of waiting like everybody else.
I hear you, man. Out here, I'm in LA, and I feel like we're kind of behind the rest of the country in terms of opening back up and getting more normal. Where are you actually located at, and what are things like just in a daily life routine for you right now?
Sure, and I think we are on the two opposite ends of the spectrum. I live in Houston.
Oh, yeah.
So Texas, the second things could be opened up, Texas was ready to do it. And I've got, buddies in California, and I've kind of talked to them like, there's probably some middle ground between the two states that maybe could have been the ideal role for everybody. But yeah, Texas just kind of the second they could pull the curtain, they were going to do it.
Yeah, in everything in life, there's a middle ground, and it seems like we are definitely on the opposite ends there in terms of where we live. But how has this affected your kind of day-to-day? I know you do a lot of recruitment on the trail. I don't know if you were actually like in the field driving around, or was it all remote always, or has this had a huge effect or not really for you?
Oh, it's had a huge effect. You talked from a perspective of our website at Sooner Scoop. We've got, usually 3 guys covering the beat every day, going to Lincoln Riley's press conferences and post-practice meetings and all these things. Obviously that gets thrown by the wayside. And then for me as a recruiting guy, I'm doing a lot of stuff on the road where I'm going to practices and seeing, guys that are either committed to Oklahoma or have a chance to end up at Oklahoma, going through all those guys, and I'm doing it all over the country. And now I'm trying to kind of play catch up and get out and see guys from, as far away as Washington, D.C. and Florida to, really even guys in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, and it totally changes the landscape with what's going on and how you're able to, and even just how these guys are working out and how they're, being recruited by teams, I'm sure is completely different. So, well, Josh, I want to talk to you a little bit about, Kenneth Murray, the first-round draft pick of the Chargers. I know a lot of fans out here are extremely excited. Great career at Oklahoma as a linebacker. Were you in the process when Oklahoma was recruiting him?
Yeah, I was a guy, as luck would have it, Kenneth being a Houston area guy was a guy I got to know very well through the recruiting process. Some of the guys, I might get to see him once, twice. But he was a guy I saw in games. I saw him in practices. I was actually there the day he committed to Oklahoma. So I've been around him for a long time, know his family a little bit. He's, he's everything that publicly is advertised. I mean, he is just a great guy, he has all the intangibles that you hear people mention with him.
Yeah, and so, I mean, I've done my research on the kid, and I'm super excited. But you obviously know a lot more than me. So was he obviously probably highly recruited out of Texas? Was there a number of big-name schools outside Oklahoma that were trying to get him, do you know? Or was it just a few select in that kind of area? Or how highly touted was he coming out of high school?
He was a good recruit, but not really an elite one. I mean, for people that don't know, Kenneth Murray, as a high school senior, played safety for his high school team at Elkins, really was recruited more as a pass rush outside linebacker as opposed to what he played as more of a Mike at Oklahoma. Now, Oklahoma, I'm sure, like you said, you've done your research. They moved him around a lot, varied what he would do, especially last year. They got a lot more multiple with him. But what I would say is he was a good recruit. It really came down to Oklahoma and Texas. He actually kind of grew up a Texas fan, but Oklahoma was just able to sell him on being able to make an early impact. At that time, they were running a 3-4, a real traditional one, and I think it was, okay, you could be our edge rusher. You're going to be our outside linebacker that's going to come down and blitz a lot, and he really bought into that.
Yeah, be like a Von Miller or something who just came out of A&M before that. So he obviously goes to Oklahoma. They mentioned moving around. I like starting kind of negative, going to positive. What about Kenneth Murray's game do you think he needs to improve upon at the next level? Because I know obviously he has the physical tools, smart kid, he's extremely athletic and has the speed. But what about his game maybe does he need to improve a little bit to be able to be successful and kind of live up to that first-round moniker?
Well, you mentioned his intelligence, and that was what was always so strange in his first few years, is you would see him have mental gaps that you just couldn't quite understand. Because, I mean, it wasn't a kid that couldn't process the information. You didn't know why these things were happening. But yeah, I mean, I see a guy that really, between the tackles, at times he can get a little lost. He can get a little caught up in traffic. I wouldn't call him the world's most physical guy. He's not the guy that you think of as he's going to go take on the guard and maybe to find a way to defeat that block. Like, that's not really his game. He's a run and chase linebacker. You want to get him in space, let him pursue. That's where he's really special. And the thing is with Kenneth Murray, a lot of his flaws, a lot of things that you see him have trouble with are things I believe he can improve on. I think he showed a big jump from his sophomore to junior year. Oklahoma, for your listeners that don't know, Oklahoma changed defensive staff, changed linebackers coach, defensive scheme, everything. I mean, they had a complete overhaul on the defensive side of the ball. And I thought that's why he took such a big leap. They made things a little more simplified for him. And again, I don't want to say that's intelligence. I don't think that's what it was. I think it's just a matter of he was able to use his physical ability to read, react, and attack what he saw, as to where I think at times in the previous regime, he was having to think so much that it negated some of his physical gifts.
Yeah, well, and that's a great way to put it, because it's not a knock on intelligence. Sometimes these defenses are so complex, you need to let these guys just act and react and not have to overthink and oversimplify things when it's just, go to the ball carrier. And I think we saw him improve in that regard. So, a lot of people, when he was selected here, already penciled him in as the next great Mike linebacker for the Chargers, and he's on that on a lot of depth charts. But then some people think he fits better as kind of the Sam linebacker in Gus Bradley's 4-3 scheme. How do you see him fitting? And you mentioned he kind of played all over the place at Oklahoma, but do you think he is a Mike at the next level? Do you think he's more fit for the Sam, or do you think they'll kind of rotate him around until he really finds his fit?
I really like him as a Sam. I think he makes a ton of sense in that role. Now, again, as a Mike, he can do it. He'll be fine. But if you're talking to me about what you think is his best future, his best ability to maximize his potential, I see him just a little away from the interior of that offensive line, being able to move him out in space a little bit. And like I said, if you can go back and watch miles and miles of his tape. When he is chasing and pursuing guys, that's when you see him creating fumbles, making, what they called at Oklahoma havoc plays, where he is just disrupting the flow of the game. And I think that's where he was truly decisive. When you go back and watch the Kansas State game from last year when Oklahoma lost, that was probably his poorest game. And it was really, I thought, Kansas State, gave him a lot of eye candy. They gave him a lot to look at. There was a lot of motion, a lot of movement in the backfield. And then secondarily, they did a lot to attack him, a lot of wham blocks, a lot of stuff right up the middle where they were kind of catching him off balance rather than, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to attack you this way, and then letting him, like I said, react to it. They were kind of forcing his hand, and I thought that's where he struggled. Now, as the season went on, you saw some other teams try and do that. Baylor tried it in the first meeting in the regular season in Waco, and I thought he did a very good job adapting to it. He clearly had reviewed that tape, had seen some things, and kind of adapted to what they were trying to do. But, again, I think he can be a very good player, and he's one of, to me, I said it, I think, the night of the draft, he is one of the safest picks in this draft. I would be shocked if Kenneth Murray is not a very solid NFL football player. Now, do I think he's a superstar at Mike? I don't know if I can get there. As Sam, I think you're talking about maybe a Pro Bowl level player. I mean, that's kind of where I have him. But that's just, me looking at it from, and again, I see a lot more of Oklahoma than I see everywhere else. So maybe I'm a little jaded in that view. But I do think he's special in that role. But regardless, I think I keep saying San Diego, Los Angeles has got a really good player.
Yeah, no, certainly in that case. And I'm going to give you a question here, and I don't even know if you've watched this guy's tape at all. Like you said, you're just honed in Oklahoma. So if you'd rather just not even answer it, just say pass. But so the Chargers obviously take Justin Herbert at 6. And at the time, Isaiah Simmons, who is probably the most highly touted linebacker / safety / Swiss Army knife in the draft, was available. They pass on him to take Herbert, and then they trade back up to 23 to take Murray, who at the time also Jordan Love was available. So there's kind of this fun debate among Chargers fans. Should they have gone Isaiah Simmons at 6 and taken Jordan Love later? When you look at just the two linebackers, if you've looked at all at Simmons from Clemson, how do you like Murray stacking up against him? Do you see them as completely different players? Do you see them as similar? Do you like Murray better? How do you kind of compare those two, if at all?
I think I am the worst person for Chargers fans to hear this from because I am a huge Isaiah Simmons fan. Like those freaky level athletes. I'm one of those people that believes, and I get this a lot from watching Oklahoma's offense, really, where I saw players in years past that would maybe not be as special as they were under Lincoln Riley, and then I watch the things he does and the creative ways he finds to use players that maybe others would have let, not reach their maximum potential. With Isaiah Simmons, I think he is as good as his defensive coordinator is. If he has an elite mind creating ways for him to attack, I can't envision a world in which he's not a dominant force. Like I just see him as that kind of guy. That length, that speed, those are rare. I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know or anybody listening. He is just a very, very unique athlete. And I remember actually covering him peripherally in high school, and he was a guy. You talk about Kenneth Murray being overlooked. Isaiah Simmons was just a guy. I mean, Kansas got very little attention, but I mean, he was a special player. And I say all this loving Kenneth Murray, both as a person, as a player. I don't think San Diego is going to have anything they regret about the choice. I keep doing it. The Chargers are going to have anything they regret. I apologize to the fans out there. But no, they're going to love that pick. It's just, like I said, I think Isaiah is so unique.
Yeah. No, yeah, I hear you. And I think a lot of people, that's kind of the fun of the debate. And, the big question for Simmons is, you mentioned the elite level defensive coordinator, Vance Joseph down there in Arizona. I don't know if anyone considers him elite level, but we'll see. We'll see how that transpires. So, yeah, it's funny you mentioned San Diego always laugh because we actually published an article recently about draft picks, and it totally flew over my head. We published the Raiders as the Oakland Raiders, so it's going to be getting used to them being Las Vegas now too. So a lot of change in the guard, so it happens. But last one for you, just curious, is this isn't necessarily Kenneth Murray, but is Oklahoma going to have another Heisman level quarterback this year? Every year they got one.
Anyone that listened, we at Sooner Scoop, we've got a podcast, pretty good following, all that kind of stuff. We were very open to being a little bit baffled by the Jalen Hurts hype. Again, you go back and look at some of those games, and I've posed the question to anybody that kind of, would go on a limb for him. You can't find the game Oklahoma won because of Jalen Hurts. Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, I can find you multiple games that Oklahoma won only because those guys were on the field. Jalen Hurts, I didn't understand it. I thought he was a good, solid player that limited Oklahoma in some of the things he could do. If you're asking me to compare what they've got in a young guy named Spencer Rattler, actually a kid from Arizona that's was an elite recruit, I think he gives Oklahoma so much more diversity in what they can do offensively. Now, he's not the runner Jalen Hurts is. I would compare him athletically very similarly to Baker Mayfield. He has that ability to pick up some yardage if need be, but that's not the hallmark of his game. But you talk about a guy with elite arm talent, can do all the things, make all the throws. I mean, he's right there with Mayfield and Murray just from a physical talent standpoint. Now, he's a true sophomore, obviously is getting hurt this year without having spring practice, summer workouts. I mean, there's all these limitations to him and how quickly he can grow. But, I mean, am I going to be surprised if he is a all Big 12 first teamer over guys like Sam Ehlinger and, the kid at Iowa State whose name I'm going to just forget right now. But, I mean, there are plenty of quality Big 12 quarterbacks, and I would still probably bet if I had to on Rattler being the first team. Now, a Heisman guy, I don't know. I wonder if there's some malaise towards Oklahoma. Like, we're just tired of seeing Oklahoma quarterbacks in New York. Maybe the voters go in a different direction just to add a little spice to everything. But if you told me next year he was anything outside of the top 3 or 4, I would be pretty surprised.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think what you said about Simmons, and you said you weren't the right guy for the Chargers, I think you just regained the trust after what you said about Jalen Hurts, because there were a lot of people saying, let's just wait and take Hurts in the second or third round. So I think that'll make them feel better that they didn't go that direction. So, Josh McCuistion, really appreciate you, man. Thanks so much for giving us some insight on Kenneth Murray.
Hey, anytime. And again, I apologize to all the Chargers fans. I have shamed you, and I do apologize.
We're trying hard to just bring the two cities together, so it just doesn't matter what you call them. And I think we're still a ways away from that, but one day we'll get there. Hey, I'm curious. Did you come out here last year for the Oklahoma UCLA game?
No, I didn't. Like I said, a bunch of our beat guys did. They were actually in the parking lot. There was a shooting that happened. It was a whole thing, and it ended up being a big story. But no, there was I was not part of that, and really had meant to be because I've always wanted to see a game in the stadium, but I just never actually got a chance to make that happen.
Oh, yeah. So I actually live in Pasadena right by the Rose Bowl, and there was a lot of red here in the city, a lot of Oklahoma fans that made the trip out. So it was fun seeing everyone.
The Oklahoma fans, like any major program, they kind of descend on whatever city they are in that weekend.
Yeah, and it doesn't hurt coming to nice sunny SoCal in October. So, well, Josh, I appreciate it, man. Where can everyone find you and your work at?
Yeah, anybody that would like to follow Josh _Scoop on Twitter. Soonerscoop.com is the site I work for. I don't know that we're going to run into a lot of Oklahoma fans out there, but if anybody's interested in the site, please feel free to, DM me on Twitter. I can definitely hook you up.
Yeah, absolutely give them a follow. Dudes, great work. All the guys with the Scoops and at Rivals are on the ground and doing great work. So keep up the good work, and thanks for jumping on with me, and stay safe and healthy, all right?
Absolutely, man. Same to you.
Huge thanks to Josh McCuistion for taking some time out of his day to talk with us about Kenneth Murray. Hope all you Charger fans enjoyed that. I think excitement around this kid joining the team brings so much versatility. I'm really curious to see if we'll see him in a Mike role or a Sam role. I'm excited for that training camp to see kind of where he fits, and I know a lot of people have him penciled in at the Mike, which he can certainly play. I mean, he can go sideline to sideline, has the speed, has the physical tools. but he might be better suited as a Sam. So we'll see. You have Drew Tranquil there, Uchenna Nwosu. I mean, there's a lot of different. Obviously, Denzel Perriman's kind of been the staple. So we'll see kind of how that linebacking core kind of comes to play in this Gus Bradley system. But good stuff from Josh. So now let's go ahead and for Rams fans, we'll get into this interview with Jourdan Rodrigue and talk some football and Los Angeles Rams. All right, I am very excited to welcome on the next guest of the Believe in LA Football podcast, Jourdan Rodrigue. She is the newest Rams beat writer for The Athletic. Jourdan, what's going on?
Hey, Ryan. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here. Just so the listeners know, offline for a minute, we were talking about how much it's been raining here in Charlotte, where I am covering the team from afar until it's safe for me to move. And this is a very, very welcome break in essentially staring out my window like a pathetic person. So I appreciate it.
Like a cat in a window sill, just
Yes.
looking outside. Well, no, we appreciate you coming on and excited to kind of get to know you and how your plan on is covering the Rams. But I want to start back. We'll kind of work through the timeline, I guess. Is kind of how I like to do things. So how did you get into sports journalism? I obviously have read up on you a little bit, so I know a little bit of your history. But I'll let you talk from your perspective. So how did you kind of get started? And obviously you're with the Panthers most recently and now to the Rams. But kind of walk me through your journey of how you got to where you are.
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked, because I think right now there are a lot of college grads in journalism who are so freaked out, understandably so, with the sort of the industry looking like what it is. And I'm here to tell everybody, and I want to make sure everybody always knows that there is no straight path. There is no cut and dry, step-by-step playbook for getting to a beat writer position, for getting to where I am so fortunate to be currently. And so for me, it was such a winding road. I knew what I wanted to do since I was like 13. I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and obviously the home of the Fiesta Bowl. I watched Boise State upset Oklahoma on a series of trick plays, and they for lack of a better phrase, they just completely blew my mind. And, my little 13-year-old brain, I just couldn't, I didn't know that kind of thing was allowed. And I asked everybody around me, how is that possible? The Statue of Liberty play, take me through it. What is that? Nobody could tell me what it was. And so, the next day I read the newspaper, the Arizona Republic, and obviously they were there covering the game, and they went into detail, just about the intricacies of what happened, why Chris Peterson just kind of emptied his playbook and went all in, how creative he is. And I was so fascinated because to me, it showed not just sort of the structure of the game itself, but also the creativity and the personalities within the game. And obviously I didn't know that. That's why I loved it so much at the time. Looking back at the time, I was like, "Oh my God, it's so cool!" But
and not to cut you off, but it was the first time in especially on that setting that we saw a trick play of that magnitude. I think back to the movie The Little Giants and the annexation of Puerto Rico, where that's a Hollywood film, but now we actually see it on the big stage.
Yeah, and it just was so thunderous, the reaction to it, and so for me, I was just immediately hooked at that point on football. And college football, I will be honest with everyone here, college football is my first love, and I was so hooked on it. I started reading the Arizona Republic sports section religiously, great series of columnists there. I also read the LA Times. I was like the weird kid in my 7th grade class who had the LA Times subscription. So,
nice.
I was poring over these articles by these phenomenal writers for these historic programs. At the time, I didn't really care much about the NFL. The Cardinals were terrible, and so I was just dissecting religiously Arizona State football, USC football, Stanford, UCLA, Cal. I was just so overwhelmingly obsessed with these programs and these writers who covered these programs. And I started reading one writer in Phoenix, Paula Boyven. They would put her picture in the paper sometimes. And I saw someone taking up space who was a woman in sports, and I didn't really understand at the time that there was a possibility for me to be able to do that until I saw her picture next to her column. So for me, that was a sort of ground moving, earth stood still moment for me. And I thought, okay, I could do this. This is what I want to do. Fast forward, I went to Arizona State for journalism. you really, really invested in writing, but obviously, you take all kinds of different paths because you want to try different things. I encourage that with people, is trying different things. So I tried a little broadcast, I even tried a little PR at one point, various internships in school. And I just kept coming back to writing, and I just kept coming back to storytelling. Mm-hmm. And the big pivotal moment for me in terms of really launching myself into a writing career was my last interview I did in college. I was working for the ASU athletics department. I was covering football for them, but I was also writing human interest and feature pieces. And I wrote about a kid named Corey Hahn, who Californians will know, born and raised in California, and he was Mr. California's Mr. Baseball. Mm-hmm. And he went to Arizona State. He was like one of their highest rated prospects at the school at the time. And he broke his spine and was paralyzed from the chest down, sliding into second in one of his early games as a freshman at ASU. And we were freshmen at the same time, so our paths kind of aligned. He got through not just this massive amount of adversity, but also graduated on time and was able to sit with me in this interview where he talked about what he had overcome and talking about how he believed everything was possible, but he had to change his perspective from playing in the majors to the best day of his life becoming when he could make a quesadilla by himself. And we sat in that interview. It was my first real experience with how powerful someone's story can be. And I always get emotional. I'm getting emotional remembering it because Corey Hahn to this day remains a figure to me who always is striving to be better and always is striving to improve his own situation and always is striving to really listen to others and advocate for others. And that's such a big part, I think, of storytelling and a big part of something that as a writer, one of our great privileges and our great gifts is the ability to display that about people and to share those things about people. And so I was really scared to try to become a writer, but Corey Hahn is the person who really motivated me to try to do it. And I went all over the place. I moved up to Seattle. I covered the Seattle Storm. That was a phenomenal experience. Sue Bird is awesome. Mm-hmm. I moved back down. I worked like 6 jobs trying to get my foot in the door as a beat writer. I was assembling emails at one point, and to pay my rent, and then trying to get clips out wherever I could. Elsewhere, I was interning. I was doing part-time work, and then finally, I had done a clip for a Elite 8 game. Wisconsin once again upset Arizona, and this guy out in Center County, Pennsylvania, saw my clip and happened to be the sports editor of the Center Daily Times, which happens to be the paper of record for Penn State football. Mm-hmm. And he called me up. I had sent my resume out to him like months ago. Never had heard back. He called me up and said, "How would you like to move across the country and be a Penn State football beat writer?" And he didn't even finish getting the sentence out before I said, "Yes, I'm in.
Yeah. Happy Valley.
Yeah. Happy Valley. Unlike anywhere else in the world, mm-hmm. So dominated by Penn State football, and so the entire city or town, I guess, it orbits around that stadium and the university. And it was very much structurally set up that way back in the old days. And I had a phenomenal experience. That is a fantastic set of beat writers. I learned from every single person I was on the beat with. And that job ended up turning into the Carolina Panthers beat writer job at the Charlotte Observer. Mm-hmm. The newspapers were owned by the same company. And so there was an opening there, and the same editor who gave me a chance when I was at Penn State came sort of trudging up to my desk with his head hung real low, and he was like, "I don't want to tell you about this opportunity, but it's there, and I think you should go for it." So that was very cool. And again, learned so much from my beat partner there at the time, Joe Person. And then on that beat, I was such a fish out of water, had no idea what I was doing when I first got there. I thought I was going to be covering college football for 10 years before maybe jumping into the columnist route, but it just didn't, luckily for me now, it didn't work out that way.
Always a different plan.
It was just, it was an incredible experience. And then I was there for 3 years and became the lead on that beat. And then I jumped over to The Athletic, And fortunately for me, my old beat partner, Joe Person, was also at The Athletic. So we were beat partners again for the last season. And now I'm here. And I know we'll get to that in a second, but I'm just really thrilled to be here. And like I said, my journey, it's just been such a winding one. And I've just always tried to keep myself open to new possibilities, new adventures, and the chance to just tell stories about human beings and to really let people in on what life is really like for the people they see on TV.
Absolutely. What an awesome journey, Jourdan. And I think that's what I love most about this industry, let alone the work. Obviously, we love sports. We're sports nuts. That's why we're in it. The storytelling aspects, we love, telling stories. But then I think just the journey and listening to colleagues and how they got it. It's very rare that anyone graduates college, gets a great high-paying journalism job or beat writing job, and then they're just there for their entire life. I feel like that very rarely ever happens. And if it does, let me know how you got to that. But everyone has yeah, exactly. Everyone has the winding thing, and I love that you mentioned just the storytelling aspects. I have friends all the time like, oh, how do you enjoy journalism or how do you enjoy the media? And I'm like, well, I'm not a journalist. I consider myself a storyteller. So on that, how do you personally kind of, as a beat writer, obviously every beat's a little different, but say, for instance, now covering the Rams, how do you take these stories that are essentially kind of like newsy, faxy stories and turn them into stories and storytelling as opposed to just, a game clip or really just have box score? Like, what's your process in that?
That's a great question. And for me, I really, first of all, I ask an obnoxious amount of questions. The old coaching staff under Ron Rivera with the Panthers used to joke that I was always like hang on, let me clarify something, girl, right?
Yeah.
So I always am searching for that extra detail, that added angle that I can sort of extrapolate into something special and something that I think is notable. And for me, I don't think that football is cut and dry. I don't think that football is a series of, binary code. I think that football is so nuanced and there's so much gray area between the hash marks that it's my responsibility to show that and to seek that. And I think that it's my huge privilege and my huge responsibility to not only seek that out on a constant basis, never to be tired of sort of the process of searching and the process of learning, but then to communicate what I've learned to other people. Mm-hmm. And so for me, when we get, when we get game stories, I don't want to write your standard gamer. I think everybody with a phone is getting a notification about what the box score is.
Yeah.
I want to know why they made the calls they did. I want to know what the players felt when they were executing. I want to know what the sounds were. Like, what does it feel like to crack your pads against somebody? What does it feel like when you're in the end zone and you all of a sudden look and you see your mom waving at you? These types of things are the absolute DNA of the game, and the calls are sort of the structure within that they are confined within. But that DNA is so beautiful and so important, and so I think that it's absolutely my responsibility to go above and beyond and to try to find those extra details that are really important. And what make people tick, as well as what makes the game so compelling on a human level to people. And so I don't think you'll see many, kind of standard newsers or standard gamers for me. I think that breaking news is really important. I am extremely competitive in that regard. And again, like, people on the Panthers beat will laugh. It's a small beat, but it was very competitive. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's important, but I don't think that's the most important thing that you can do as a storyteller, as a reporter. I think if you can let your readers in to the why of things, that is the most important thing you can do as a reporter and as a writer.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think of sports in general, but football specifically is just so artistic. And I kind of look at it when I'm trying to work, I look at it like a blank canvas. And, okay, I can give a snapshot that someone can kind of, as they're at the museum, walk by, glance, say, oh, that was cool. Or I can weave this tapestry that's a beautiful work of art that someone stands there, looks at from afar for hours and really digest. That's kind of my goal when I look at it, and obviously it looks like yours too. And I think Rams fans will appreciate that intricacy when you do get out here and continue your work. So excited for that, excited to read all your stuff. And obviously you've already been doing stuff for a while now, but I want to talk briefly about The Athletic because they kind of hold a close thing to my heart. Obviously, my company is a startup as well. Obviously, I'm not even close to the ranks of The Athletic, but here's a company that started a number of years ago to really take on kind of standard media, and now they've really become a huge company in the U.S. So what was it that drew you to The Athletic? Did they come to you? Was it a company that you were like, you know what, this seems kind of cool what they're doing. I kind of want to get out of traditional newspaper. Or was it just kind of, meeting people and it just happened?
Yeah, they came to me back when I was at the Observer. And it was one of those things where when I saw their early success and I saw the caliber of writers that they were bringing in, to me, it became such a hope factor. And you know this very well. And by the way, can I say, you guys do some great work. Like I told you offline, I'm still so new, but really the good work very much stands out early on. So thank you very much for having me on. And, The Athletic, you know this from working in a startup, there's a little cautious optimism at all times, right? But for me, it really represented hope because here was a platform that they don't want clicks. They don't want sort of the churn of that beat reporting so often can be. They want you to create an immersive experience for their readers because you are the expert in the field. And so you are able to, like you said, weave the tapestry. And that's quality that they have stuck with. And that's something where, early in the early phases of it, you think, okay, that's very nice. That's a great business model. Good for you. But like, then you're like, but you need to show me that you're doing it. And they have. And so for me, the draw for me was not just that type of storytelling and being able to do things that are weird and different at times, but also do some really quality, beautiful work. And work that people, I think, really seek and really search for amid all of the like gross noise all over the place these days. And then at the same time, the ability to work with some of these colleagues that I have now, who I've been a fan of like for most of my adult life, if not before that. And that's a network of colleagues that I think you push each other, you try to make each other better. And it's competitive while being very amiable and very friendly environment because you want to be on their level. You want to, you want to write like Lindsey Jones. You want to write like Dan Pompei. You want to write like Marcus Thompson. These people who you've read for so long, you want to rise to their level. And so for me, it's very, very motivating experience to be here. And I've appreciated how they've let me expand my voice and let me invest in myself as a writer. I've had the best editors I've ever had in my entire career by working here because they have pruned and they have sort of cut where they need to, but they've also done that without completely stifling my voice. And that hasn't been the case in previous places. And I think a lot of young journalists are frustrated with those types of things because a lot of places now are content farms. And, particularly you see the things, it's very, very frustrating to see what's happening at Sports Illustrated. It's very, very frustrating to see what's happening at local newspapers all over the country, turning into content farms. And I consider myself very, very, very lucky. And I want people to know, and I'm glad you asked about this because I want people to know that is not a gift and that's not a privilege that I take lightly. That's something that means so much to me, and I want to just reinvest that back into the readers.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, The Athletic has just done an awesome job. And from the start, I mean, they took a startup and then brought in voices and names and talented people that really built their brand from the get-go. And now you're one of those. So it's awesome that you're able to continue doing that. And so being in, obviously, Charlotte covering the Panthers, the Rams had a great writer here in Vinny Bonsignor who moved on to Vegas, so they had an opening here. Was LA kind of on your radar? Again, did they come to you and say, hey, would you be willing to fly across the country yet again? Obviously, you're an Arizona girl, so maybe you missed the sunshine. What kind of went into you coming to LA?
So I can't get super into like the contract details,
Fair,
but
yeah.
I will say that it was very, very cool upon sort of moving from the Observer to the Athletic. It was very, very cool how the people at the Athletic listened very carefully to my long-term goals and have since made that happen. And for me, first of all, I love Vinny. Can I just say, Vinny and Rich Hammond, two goats. Like, great guys. Like, Vinny's so awesome. He does not have to be, like, he helped me so much. I saw him back at the Combine, and I talked to him for a little bit about this opportunity, and, like, he did not have to help me. He's in Vegas now. Like, why would he? But he did. And Rich Hammond has gone above and beyond trying to onboard me and, like, get me up to speed and get me to pivot. I mean, I want people, like, it is such a massive thing to pivot beats like this. And I'm so grateful because LA, West Coast, this is where I'm supposed to be. I know that in my soul. It's where my brain feels good. And I laugh about that. But really, it is. My brain feels, and my creative soul and my energy feels like it can just open up. And I'm so anxious to get out there. And I'm very, very excited about that. But it's just so difficult to just pivot. And when I covered the Panthers, that's 4 years of the number one thing I think about, I talk about, I use 99% of my brain energy toward, and the other 1% is like for my dog. Like that's your life.
Yeah.
If you immerse yourself as a beat writer, you know this very well. Like, it's your life. And so that's been tough because you've been in like this tunnel vision, right? And then all of a sudden you pivot. But for me, having people like Vinny and having Rich has been so helpful. The team has been so helpful. I feel like I already have learned so much from the brief times with the coaching staff and the players that we've had on Zoom. And so I'm getting off on a tangent now. But basically, yes, LA is where I've always wanted to be.
Oh, good. Yeah. I'm assuming you've been to LA before, yes?
Oh, yeah. I lived there. I lived in North Hollywood for 4 months when I was right before my senior year of college. I did an internship out there. And it was, I loved it so much. I thought maybe someday I would get back around to it. And I'm just, it's just, what an amazing place. What an amazing city. I just can't wait to be there.
Yeah, no, it's great. I was, you obviously went to ASU. I went to Long Beach State here south of LA, but I was at the ASU UCLA game when Brock Osweiler was the starting quarterback, who had obviously the pretty good 1 year at ASU, had not the greatest NFL career, but yeah, it was a fun game, sitting there seeing the big 6'8" Brock Osweiler slinging the ball around.
And seeing him run very much similarly to a giraffe.
Yes, giraffe, a gallop if you want to call it. So with the Rams now, obviously you haven't been here physically, and even if you were here, it would all be through Zoom. But what's been your initial interpretation of Sean McVay, who I think is just an awesome guy, awesome coach, but you going from Ron Rivera and then now to Sean McVay, what's that transition kind of been like?
Well, he was a big draw for me in terms of what my next step would be in my career, because I feel that if you have the gracious opportunity to be a little selective, you go where you can learn, right?
Yeah.
And for me, my goal, I never want to stop learning about this game. I never want to stop finding the intricate details of this game. And so Sean McVay, I mean, that's like what he's composed of, his details, right?
Yeah.
So I just thought, to me, I want to go somewhere, not just where I want to be physically, but also somewhere really exciting where I know I'm going to learn something every day. I know I'm going to find something that's cool every day and be able to share that. And so far early on, has not fallen short of any expectations. I mean, he is really, as you know, I covered him. I covered the Super Bowl a couple years ago, and I was very, very impressed. I think like everyone is when they hear him speak. But he doesn't. That was so genuine. Like, he doesn't put on a show. And so for me, I think that's been really impressive, was to see how consistent he is with sort of his obsession with the game and the creative ways that he and his staff are viewing, how football is played, and trying to, again, bend the structure of the confines of it so that they can sort of have a competitive advantage. And also because they kind of geek out about it. And I really like that, because I think if we cover this and we spend so much of our lives doing this, you have to be kind of a a football nerd. And so it's nice to be around people who are sort of similar mindset.
Totally, yeah. And I've been in the pit a few times at training camp, and I just love that Sean always answers every question by name. He remembers all the reporters' names and looks you right in the face, so he's always very respectful in that regard. So, great guy. Well, Jourdan, I've probably already kept you longer than you planned, but I do want to talk a little football briefly.
For sure.
So let's just talk about the draft briefly. How did you think? I think when the draft happened, there was a lot of shock and awe what the Rams did, and then kind of as the dust settled and people chewed on it more, myself included, a lot of people were like, you know what, this was a good draft, and there was a lot of good draft picks. What was kind of your I'm trying to think of your timeline when you joined the Rams. I guess I should first ask, did you really pay attention to the Rams draft? Did you know that was happening? And if you did, what was your initial reaction to kind of their draft experience?
Yeah, I did pay attention to it. I had signed my contract quite a bit earlier, but I wanted to finish out my time through the draft with the Panthers. I just felt like that was a neat way to put a bow on things. Totally. But I did pay attention to the Rams draft. I think that once people arrived at what internally was a foregone conclusion, and that was, we are going to try to get some consistency within our offensive line by using the same personnel because we need them to grow together and develop rapport together before we give up on them. That's a foregone conclusion internally, right? So once people understood that was always the decision that they were going to be making, then they were like, oh, okay, now I see why you kind of went with your skill positions and things like that. And for me, I absolutely love the Cam Akers pick. Yep. I love the Van Jefferson pick, and I love those two picks in particular because I believe that there's a next level a quarterback has to take at this point in his career. Jared Goff is very much at this point where they really are figuring out what he will be long term, right? There was a lot. When you have a Super Bowl, it puts a Band-Aid on a lot of things that you don't need to address immediately. One of these things now that they need to address is obviously, long-term future of a couple of guys, but Jared Goff, how he can take the next step. But a quarterback in this league, and so often coaches get so backwards when they approach this, and I'll get to that in a second, but some coaches and some GMs think this quarterback, because he is a number one overall pick, because he is a high drafted first rounder, he should be able to do this by himself. And that's not the case. You need to have people who can help him, and not just the star receiver who can stretch the field. You need to have layers set up, and then also a backfield set up where you have safety valves for this quarterback so that he can sort of have his confidence in executing and taking ownership of the playbook. And in Cam Akers, I think that they very much have done that. I saw what Christian McCaffrey was able to do for Cam Newton when utilized in the passing game. It was just so great at that point for his career. And then I saw what, receivers like DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel were also able to do in terms of setting up those intermediate layers in the field and really being able to provide a more complex look for a defense, but a much simpler look for a quarterback. And so those are the types of players I think Cam Akers and Van Jefferson are. I think they were brought in part for that reason, to make the quarterback's life easier, and to make things more efficient overall. I agree too with the increased tight end use. I think that's something that definitely makes a quarterback's life easier. A bigger target, what's not to like, right?
Yeah.
But I think that's so fascinating to me about what the Rams have done. They didn't necessarily, they kind of intersected best player available with need in terms of where the need hierarchy was on their board. And so once people arrived with the understanding that they were never going to reinvest in offensive linemen that they would have to then redevelop, they felt like they were further along with the guys they have. Once they were like, okay, well, that was probably their foregone conclusion entering the draft process. Okay, then now I see why they did what they did. And so I think that's starting to fall into place a little bit more for them.
Yeah, and the fans' needs aren't necessarily what the organization ranks as top needs. And so, again, once they kind of accepted that, I think they did a really good job. And everyone kind of forgets is, a drafted offensive lineman doesn't just necessarily go to training camp and is a Pro Bowl starter from day one. It takes a long process,
right.
And they invested heavily the last 2 years, taking 4 guys total 2 years prior on the offensive line. So, yeah, they're trying to invest in that. And, yeah, I love the 2 picks you mentioned, Jefferson and Akers. I think Akers is the back that they kind of had in Gurley 2 or 3 years ago and then obviously didn't have last year, and he'll give that. And I agree with you. You know, Jared Goff, you know, is a great quarterback, I think. I think he gets a lot of flack that maybe is undeserved, but he needs that extra help. And you know, a quarterback I look at, you mentioned obviously Cam Newton and Christian McCaffrey, who is one of my favorite running backs in the entire league. But you look at a guy like Patrick Mahomes, who gets all the credit in the world, and deservedly so. The guy is unbelievable. But he has, like, the greatest offensive weapons in the entire league. He has a Pro Bowl offensive line almost at every position. So you have to give them those attributes and those skill players and those protection. And I think the Rams did that through this draft. And I think we'll see that, you know, obviously benefit down the line. And another pick I love, and maybe if you want to talk about him a little bit, but Terrell Lewis, I wrote a piece on him last week, who they got in the 3rd round, who had some injury history at Alabama, but just the talent and the physical skill set he has could end up being the steal of the draft, as he has elite pass rush ability when healthy. So hopefully he's a guy that can kind of come to this defense with Brandon Staley and evolve into a great pass rusher.
Well, and I like him because he's moldable. Like you don't necessarily have to box him into a specific scheme, a specific skill set, because he is so moldable, and he showed that at Alabama. I mean, the injury history, I think, I know that's why he fell. Yeah. Otherwise he would have gone much higher, but he's very moldable and he's very malleable. And I think another key point that shows what kind of investment they are making in him, despite the injury history, is having Leonard Floyd on the roster. Yep. I think that Leonard Floyd is going to be a key person in the growth of Terrell Lewis. I think that you can develop guys all you want, but if they don't have a veteran presence sitting next to them in the room, teaching them how to be a pro, teaching them sort of the nuances of what it takes to have success in this league, teaching him how to take care of his body, then that's really, really important. So I really like that. I really liked their draft all over. I mean, I know I'm an optimist, but I really did like their draft. I think they got some really promising players. And they filled the absolute needs that they needed to fill on offense, while also kind of drafting for the future on defense. Yeah,
I'm always a glass half full guy, and I think too, you look at these young kids that are fulfilling their dreams. It's hard for me to like bash a draft right. when these are guys that are just fulfilling a dream. But I do think the Rams did do a good job and filled a lot of needs, and it'll be fun to see. And I was really high on that Leonard Floyd signing too, probably higher than most. I think just his versatility, the fact that he has some history with Brandon Staley, I think will bode well as well. So, well, Jourdan, this was fun. I really appreciate the time and talking about Rams and your journey in this process, and excited for you to get to LA and extend your coverage on the team.
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I know he plays for the Chargers, but Trey Turner coming out here, LA. Maybe you guys can help each other out, find a place.
Oh my God, Trey's the best. Chargers fans, if you guys are listening to this, oh my God, you are going to love Trey Turner. That dude is the best.
Yeah, I ecstatic when that trade happened. Nothing against who the Chargers traded, but I think it was just a great move for them, and he's a great player, and you mentioned a great guy. So, yeah, if you guys need, you guys can cooperate and try to get apartments out here or something, since he's making the move also.
He can help me. He already got out here before the quarantine stuff, so.
Oh, he came quick. Okay.
Yeah, he can help me figure it out, because he's probably got to lay the land a little bit better than me at this point.
Well, there you go. You have a connect. So, well, Jourdan Rodrigue of The Athletic. You also do the 11 Personnel podcast with Rich Hammond. Thank you so much for the time. Stay safe, stay healthy, and hopefully you're able to move out here soon.
Thanks, Ryan.
We'll talk to you soon. All right, big thanks to Jourdan Rodrigue for spending some time with me, talking football, talking her journalism journey. The Athletic does great stuff. They have great coverage, and I love their style of writing. That's kind of the storytelling aspect that I try to bring to, and all of our writers try to bring to LAFB Networks. Hopefully you can see that as well. And yeah, thanks so much to all you for listening to another episode of Believe in LA Football. Appreciate you all. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen. We are on every podcast platform. We're not Joe Rogan. We're not going exclusively to Spotify. So you can find us everywhere: Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, the whole gamut. Or you can just go to LAFBnetwork.com, listen right there. We have all the episodes up there if you want to just listen in your browser. We're also on YouTube now. If you're a big YouTube user, just search LAFB Network, our channel there. Hit the subscribe. Listen to all of our episodes on YouTube. Find us on Twitter LAFB Network. I am Ryan Dyrud, LAFB. We're on Instagram. We're on Facebook. You can email us, podcast@lafbnetwork.com if you have any questions you want answered, if you want to join the show. Love to have you on. Love to talk some LA football. Got a great show next week. We're going to talk a little bit of UCLA, new athletic director. We haven't talked UCLA in a while, but we're going to talk a little bit UCLA announcing the new athletic director, and we'll get into some other stuff with the other three teams as well. But stay healthy, stay safe out there. Help someone today you didn't help yesterday. And then most importantly, not most importantly, but still importantly, make sure to always listen to the Believe in LA Football podcast.